breaky. I always remember being shouted out across the field because it was a code basically for people doing things they probably shouldn't be doing on the field. They shouted it very loud as he was walking over, and then that echoed around the field. But
a warning system, a meerkat warning system.
A very good warning system.
Yeah. Hello there. My name is Kit Rackley. My pronouns are they, them, and this is Coffee and Geography. The aim of the show is to get to know, explore and celebrate the diverse and intersectional range of people on this rock we call home and their love and passions of it. We'll find out why guests identify as geographers, and if they don't exactly, we'll have fun exploring all the myriad of ways that connects their life to geography. So, pour your favourite brew, get cosy and listen in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at CoffeeJogPod. Off we go. Hello everybody, welcome to Coffee and Geography, and I'm joined with someone who I've got lots of connections to, not met that much, but actually very connected to, as you'll very much find out during the episode. And I'm joined by Niall Cole. Hello.
Hello, good morning. I'm allowed to say that, yeah.
Yeah, of course you're allowed to say. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's 10 past 10, and to give a timestamp everybody, because you're listening to this you'll be listening to this whenever you're listening to it, but earliest is probably November. What's today now? Was it 26th of August?
So on.
Yeah. And that's actually quite a relevant day, because that means you are, of course, a week away from starting your first full-time teaching post. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll wait and see how that one goes. I'm feeling ready. I mean, I'm at the point now, I think, where I'm kind of ready to get back into it, but I have absolutely no idea. Like, I mean, loads of people last year said to me that kind of they forgot how to teach when they got back after summer holiday. So considering I've only had 1 year of like training, I'm a bit worried about how those first few lessons are going to go, but excited at the same time just to get back into the flow of everything.
Yeah, I remember that feeling. It's like a mixture of complete excitement, can't wait to see the kids again, and complete dread at the same time. Yeah, and I've got plenty of friends and teaching colleagues in the United States, for example, who are listening to this. I do not know, you folks, how you can have like 3 months break. For everybody who just didn't see Niall's face there, Niall's face was like, "What?" So, but yeah, it's like, because I don't know. I don't know where I stand with this. Some people argue it would be nicer to have more regular but shorter breaks. Some people would say no, I'd want an even bigger summer. I don't know where I go backwards and forwards with that. I don't know. What do you think, Noel? I mean, you haven't even started the career really. I don't know if you have an opinion.
I've seen that recently. I've seen a lot of people on Edgy Twitter go like saying about kind of more like separated breaks, maybe like 2 weeks breaks all the way through. And I don't really think I've got an opinion yet. It's nice to have like the kind of 4 weeks breaks like in the summer and kind of enjoy those summer months. But then at the same time, I feel like you do get quite run down, don't you? Like towards the end of half time. So it might be like nice to have a little bit longer there, but I feel like you never really know, do you, until you actually kind of get into it and try them both out.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, right, okay, actually this is where like the ridiculous lag between recording and release is actually going to work in our favour, right? Because as you're listening to the first time, it'll be at least November, right? So here's a sweepstakes for everybody, right? No, do not say anything live on Twitter at the time, right? When did Niall Cole hit the wall? Was it A, just a couple of weeks into term? B, halfway for the half term, or it's not till November at the time. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I used to be so full of energy for the first week or two, and then boom, and then already I was looking. And I've seen some poor teachers on Twitter already saying, I haven't even started back yet, and I'm already looking forward to half term. But anyway, if you're not in the teacher profession, you're probably thinking, oh, here we go, teachers moaning again about it. But if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. All right, just speak to teachers. Okay, so Noel was a trainee geography teacher and now going to be what we call an NQT, a newly qualified teacher, a keen sportsman that is interested in everything and has learned not yet to say no. Well, you'll learn very quickly, trust me. This means that you can find Noel find at many teaching events, particularly those of the Royal Geographical Society and the Geographical Association, as a scholar. And presenting the Friday Late Show on Teachers Talk Radio. So hopefully, Noel, you're back on the air by the time everybody's listening to this. That'd be awesome. You also supervise the Duke of Edinburgh expeditions or angering drivers on the local roads. Oh, yeah, these Norfolk roads.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, like, because that was mainly about cycling, and I feel like you're really angry, like, at any sort of
Oh.
driver, and when I'm walking as well. But in Norfolk, there's I've forgotten what road it is. I think it might be the A11, but they do a time trial down the A11. And I think that really winds people up as well. But I always look at the cyclists and I'm just like, why would you want to cycle down that road? Like, cars just flying past you. So I tend to stick to the back roads and
Yeah.
enjoy the views.
As someone who used to cycle to work quite a lot, I really, really got quite anxious trying to go on those big roads, and I would stay on them as short as possible time as I possibly could. And for those of you folks who are not aware about the county of Norfolk, we don't have a motorway. We have, the A11 is one of our major carriageways it runs between Norwich. It kind of goes through Thetford, and then joins up the M11, but not until we get into Essex. So, yeah, right. So now, we are drinking a brew.
We are.
What do you have with you today?
So it's a L'Or coffee. L'Or, yeah, Classique. I think some people say they used to be Carte Noire, but I'm not too sure. And then, yeah, but it's from a coffee machine. So I thought, because obviously you talked a lot about where the coffees come from. So Tassimo Pods, I don't know if you've heard of them. So they're like kind of pod machines, and they do these like tea discs, they're called. So there's an interesting, because I know you're quite interested in going and looking at some of the sustainability. Because I'm waiting to find out myself still, but you can recycle them using TerraCycling, TerraCycle system. But I haven't looked too much into how kind of sustainable and stuff it is, so it might be interesting to check that one out.
I love how now I'm getting to the point where I've talked to quite a few people. So I think you're what we on at the moment. I think you're my 20. I think this is 24, right?
Oh.
And the last person to mention TerraCycle actually was Dr. Jess Tipton, who was episode 16. So I'm starting to get this thing now where there's connections being made between guests, which is perfect, because this is one of the things that this podcast is aiming for, is that there's more that connects us than we realize. So yeah, that's really cool, and that'll be something that's going to be great for the Coffee and Geography interactive map, which people can find on the website, and to see if they can investigate the sustainability. And I know that Niall, people like yourself and other geography teachers, keep an eye on that map, might be able to use it as a learning resource. So
Definitely will.
Yeah. Right, your location then. So we're probably going to talk a bit about this, because we've both got big connections to where you're from, and that is the South Norfolk area. And in fact, you were born and raised in the catchment area of the school I taught at for 13 years. So in South Norfolk. But you're going to be moving away at some point. How much of a South Norfolk lad are you? I mean, how much does it form your identity?
No, I love it. I love everything that I can do. I mean, I always talk about how it's kind of pretty impressive how I'm literally 10 minutes drive from Norwich city centre, and you get everything there that you kind of want of city life and urban life, and all of the kind of unique history that's gone into the city, whilst also being right on the Broads. So there's such a lucky balance, which I don't think you probably get in many other places. So I will miss that side of it. But I mean, I was thinking it's interesting with place, because I always associate place with the people and kind of that I meet in those areas, rather than necessarily the area itself. So I've never felt too attached to one specific place. I more kind of tend to float around wherever I want to go and see the people that I want to see. So I definitely associate myself as a South Norfolk boy, but kind of I like to just take in everywhere I go really and see how it is when I get there.
You did your teacher training, your PGCE course at the University of East Anglia,
Yeah.
which is how we met. And I'm just wondering, because you've got quite a few, majority of people on that cohort would have been people who have come from other parts of the country. So did you ever get into a conversation with those other folks about, why is it you decided to do your PGCE local? Why you do what everybody else does and kind of go somewhere else and do it? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting year as well, because I think obviously with kind of COVID and pandemic, I mean, probably everyone comes up with that at some point and mentions how that's impacted things. But I think there's a real mixture this year of people that were from Norfolk or different areas of Norfolk, and then people that had moved. And actually, a lot of people were quite surprised about the people that had moved to Norfolk to do the PGCE, because in this year it was harder to meet people on your course. Like, people didn't, everything was online pretty much. I think I had a week worth of in kind of uni days, and then everything on placements were obviously in person.
Yeah.
But obviously the session that you did with us was online, and everything else was kind of the same. So it was quite hard to go and meet people, and we didn't really kind of go and see each other on the cohort. But when we got into conversations about it, and it's quite funny, and it's quite funny the perceptions that some of them formed, I'd say, of Norfolk. So like some of them because we would often go for like maybe countryside walks. That was one of the things that you could still go and do for large parts of it. And we'd go to really like kind of really nice places like Burnham, Overy, Staithe, and like kind of.
Yeah.
So their perception of Norfolk was kind of like this posh Norfolk, kind of like Land Rovers, Barber jackets, that sort of kind of Norfolk. And they're like, oh, I really like the Norfolk lifestyle, and it's slow that's not necessarily how I think a lot of people from Norfolk would assume or would kind of call their like describe their lifestyle. But I also think Norfolk is such a diverse place in terms of like wherever you go, that you've got so many different kind of, I wouldn't say cultures, but just different ways of life and different activities and stuff that people tend to do there. And Norwich itself is very different, even if you go then 15 minutes outside of Norwich, like what you would expect. So it was interesting to get their kind of opinions of the area when they had only kind of been able to see very small like segments of it. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, and when I taught at the high school right near where you live, it was what was really interesting to me is that it was a microcosm, of course, of the area. It was very, very white. It wasn't very diverse in terms of race in that respect, but it was exceptionally diverse, as you just said, with regards to the different ways of life that each of these students had. So even though, we only had, I think it was only like 2% of the students were non-white, which is generally reflective of the area. But even within those, you still had quite stark differences. And the catchment area of the school actually expanded while I was there to include, and you'll recognise these names, and I'll describe what they are for other people, but to include places like Lakenham, in Norwich, which for everybody who don't know, that's an inner city part of Norwich, which is one of the more deprived parts of Norwich in some respects. But then you've got, and then you go out to the opposite end to where you are, in the Rockland area, which is very rural, a mixture of people who have very strong rural backgrounds, a couple of areas which have got rural poverty, but very, very affluent rural areas as well. And it was just, and even the mixture, the diversity in between the rural folk was just incredible to me. So I tried to play on that diversity as much as I possibly could. And we don't want to be homogenizing people, even on that respect. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. And you mentioned, I wonder if you know this fact then. So the other really cool thing about that area is it is one of the highest points in the county. In fact, the second highest point in the county. Did you know that?
No, not certainly still trying to work out whereabouts based on my knowledge of the area where that would be.
Think of what kind of infrastructure likes tallest bits?
You have got, there is the telephone poles, the telegraph poles, isn't there?
The telephone towers. Yep. They're the ones. That is the second highest point in Norfolk. That is. So, and the first highest point is Cromer Ridge, of course, the peak of Cromer Ridge. So here you go, but you're going to laugh at this, right? All right. No, I'm not, just because you're a geography teacher doesn't mean you know this off the fact. But have a guess. How high do you reckon the base of those poles are?
The base. Let's go like 85 meters.
Oh, you're so close. Yeah, it more or less is. Yep. Right. So there you go. Which for everybody, this is the second highest point in Norfolk, right? That is only about 260 feet above sea level, right? And the school where I taught at is 75 meters above sea level, so about 250 feet. So yeah, that's but dispel this myth for us, because everybody thinks Norfolk totally flat. So, but you've cycled around Norfolk. Yeah. You're shaking your head. You cycled around Norfolk. So tell us, what is it in reality?
Oh, I always say this. It's very undulating. Like it's very up and down. And like on any of my cycle routes, there's quite a few hills. They're all short, but like there's no flat hardly at all. There's one part where I'm literally cycling along a road, like in a valley, along the river, and that is flat. But then anywhere outside of it, you are going up a hill. Like they're very short, but they're very up and down. You never really get much of a break, and particularly, North Norfolk's even, I would say, more kind of undulating. But and Gas Hill in Norwich. That's
Gas Hill, Norwich.
Anyone that's been in and around Norwich and does some running or cycling or wants a bit of a challenge knows Gas Hill. So there are some hills. It's not completely flat.
Yeah. And shout out to one of my ex-students who went to that high school, Johanna, who in episode 18 talked about the Gas Hill gasp. So, yeah, and I used to live at the top of Gas Hill, so I did the gasp voluntarily sometimes getting back home from work when I was much, much fitter. But yeah, you talked about North Norfolk, of course, and that's where the glacial terminal moraine of Cromer Ridge is located, and that is the highest point in Norfolk, standing at around 100 metres above sea level, 330 feet. So yeah, just because we're low-lying, everybody, doesn't mean it's not, and Noel used the perfect word, undulating, because I've cycled, and you can get, right, that's brilliant. So you're going to be moving away now. To not too far away in as the crow flies, I guess, but you're going to Hertfordshire because you're going to be starting in a school in Broxbourne. So congratulations on that. So awesome. How are you feeling about moving away from your heartland?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that because, like I said before, kind of you get to meet new people. I'm going back to like a lot of people that I went to university with living in and around that area, so I'll get to go and explore that area with them and kind of see how they see the area. But also, I mean, the person that I'm living with, he's got so many OS maps and he's got so many walks and stuff that he's done over the years that he's accumulated and has already shown them to me. So I'm looking forward to that aspect too, of just being able to go out and explore, because that's what I'll do. Like straight away, I kind of get out on my bike or go and walk around and kind of take in the area. So from that sense, I'm looking forward to it. And I'll probably come back to Norfolk all the time. But just kind of, that's the thing, just try and take in as much as possible while I'm there. And then obviously the prospect of new school and kind of new ways of doing things is interesting as well. Yeah,
it's very rare I've actually talked to anybody who's like moving out of Norfolk. If you I've gone the opposite way, right? So I'm from the area that you're moving to. So I'm from Harlow in Essex, which is not too far away from Broxbourne. And I've moved up here and I really, really love it up here and I don't really want to move away, right? But you're going in the opposite direction. Do you get this thing where people say they move to Norfolk and then they seem to not be able to move away, or they find settled here? I mean, do you understand that, or are you like, I can't understand why people come here and stay?
No, I do. And I think it's interesting because that is the classic, isn't it? Everyone. And I think people come to the uni and they don't leave. Like, they love it so much, they don't leave, they get a job and that's them set. And everyone used to say it to me when I was younger. And I think my perception is changing like quite a bit. Since I was young, when I was younger, I was absolutely like, I'm getting out of like Norfolk, I'm getting out of Norwich. Like, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to live in London or I live in a city. Like, that was very much what I was into. Very much kind of corporate lifestyle almost a bit, or like kind of thinking about that. And I think I just rejected everyone else and was like, that was my kind of, there's almost a bit of like a pushback of like everyone kind of like saying, oh, you'll love it here and you won't want to leave and you'll miss it when you've gone and stuff. But now, as I've came back, I've seen it very differently to how I saw it when I was younger, because obviously I've gone away to university and I came back, and this year like I've had to kind of go and explore a little bit more, and like now I do understand that sort of aspect of like why you wouldn't want to leave. It is hard though as well, as in terms of a balance, because as you said before, it isn't necessarily the most diverse kind of place as well. So like I enjoy the countryside, I enjoy going and spending time with people here, and at the same time, because I like kind of taking in loads and loads and loads of different cultures and kind of spending time with my mates from university who have like kind of different cultures and who kind of are very different people to what I had met before in Norwich and Norfolk. Like it's kind of, I'm being torn between the two, and I don't think I fully know like what I think. Maybe that'll change again. Maybe I'll go away for 6 months and then I'll be like, no, I want to go back to Norfolk. But I never know. I think that's the thing. I want to try out different things all the time, and I'm not very good at just sticking to one thing. So maybe sticking to Norfolk for the whole life probably isn't necessarily my lifestyle or my kind of personality, but it might end up being if it draws me back.
Yeah, and in reality, you're absolutely spot on. It's whatever happens during the certain periods of your life, it's not just about places, it's about people as well. I mean, you get really strong friendships at one part of your life, and then they kind of filter out, not because of anything nefarious, but maybe just because people grow and move on, and their circles change and stuff like that. So perhaps the reality is that our lives are fluid, and that probably goes for our sense of place as well. And of course, places themselves are fluid and changing all the time as well. So if you don't move and flow with the place, that then you might become detached from it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
In the village of Framingham on Poor Inland, of course, very recently they've had epic scale of new housing development, for example, and that's changed the character of that. Well, I wouldn't consider Poor Inland Framingham as a village anymore, to be honest.
No.
Because it seems to have lost that feel of ordered dwellings. I mean, with all that stuff that's gone on around the last few years, how's that felt to you and your family about all of this infrastructure and these new builds that have gone in place?
Yeah, no, I think that's I was literally about to then say what you just said about it not being a village anymore, and so it's in that kind of in between place where it's not really a village and it's not really a town. It doesn't have like a town centre or anything. It's kind of just got like a long road through with houses built either side of it. And I think that it's very interesting to think about how that would grow, and it's very much, I think it is because it's so close to the edge of Norwich that like people are moving there, and like kind of why there's like house demand. Then you've obviously got all of that kind of open space to build on.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of the other side of the road, so like kind of for us it doesn't necessarily impact like how people see it. But I know my grandparents who have lived kind of in the village that they live in, they've lived there all pretty much or a large part of their life, and they moved away and then moved back, and they say about how it's changed. But then, and my uncle lives in Portland, and I don't think they haven't really said too much about it because it has been able to accommodate the number of people that moved so far. But I think that expansion will continue, and it would be interesting then to see how people kind of take that. But if Portland kept going, you'd get into Brook soon, and then that's the extension, isn't it? How far does that go along? And if that eats into Brook, which is probably a bit of a smaller village and still has a bit of its identity as a village, how much that would impact kind of them would be an interesting thing in a couple of years maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's that new housing estate that's been built on the northern edge of Brook. So there's a tiny little bit that's growing out towards, it's almost, is this going to continue in this, in my opinion, this is very unsustainable way of development? Or is there going to be a point where there's some kind of balance reached? Or are we going to end up with just a massive conurbation? But so interesting to see how that pans out. I'm going to move to a certain specific person then, someone who, when you was in high school, because you went to high school in Norwich, and we want to give this person a shout because we both know them. You used to know him as Mr. Sprake. I used to know him as Matt Sprake because I was a colleague of his, but we both know him as Sprakey.
Yeah, so, Sprakey.
Sprakey. So we're just going to give a shout out to you, Sprakey. I hope you're doing okay. So for me, he taught PE at the school that I taught at, and we played football with each other quite a fair bit. So, but you experienced him as from a student's point of view. So go on, without embarrassing him too much, dish the dirt. Go on then.
No, well, it's interesting. He started off when I first started in high school. He was my head of house. So, and that was how I kind of perceived him. He was one of the first people that kind of welcomed us in and everything. And then he grew with us all the way through football. I mean, there's a few different stories I could tell. I remember quite a few of them. I mean, there's one in year 8 when I was playing football after school, and I remember very vividly. I said I just told someone that like it was a rubbish pass, and like he wasn't very happy. Let's just say that he pulled me straight over and was like, "Oh, you can't do that. Like you need to like think about like kind of how you motivate your teammates and how this." And it was very, and I still remember that. So obviously he was probably right. And probably wasn't the best way to treat someone who was actually a very good friend, but at that point in time, like obviously wasn't very nice to. So he's probably right with that. Sprakey, I always remember being shouted out across the field because it was a code basically for people doing things they probably shouldn't be doing on the field. They shouted it very loud as he was walking over, and then that echoed around the field.
But a warning system, a meerkat warning system,
a very good warning system. But yeah, I have a lot of good memories, and probably the best one was just I remember like getting into university in sixth form because he was then head of sixth form when I was there, and he was still like managing our sixth form football team. But he just ran out just to say when I'd got my place at Warwick University, and I remember him like running out and kind of talking to me and saying about like his experiences when he'd gone and visited a friend there. And just those sort of things where kind of maybe you don't appreciate so much as a student, but then looking back and like as you get a bit more kind of mature and get a bit older, and you just think about like how like from a teacher's perspective now you go, oh, actually like he must have been so busy and had so many different things going on. And to then kind of, and he would have done that for a lot of students. So to then kind of go out and say that to a student and to kind of take the time to go and do that, it just shows the sort of person he was. So yeah, got some different stories from varying levels of kind of my behaviour and different people's behaviours at school. But I can see, kind of.
We'll quit while we're ahead on that. Yeah. And I don't usually do discussions where we talk about individuals and stuff like that. But I thought that would be nice because for a couple of reasons. Because as you just said it yourself, and I was about to say it, because you were a student going into the teacher profession now, so you've got that kind of like dual experience about how that would feel like from both the students and the teacher's point of view. And the one thing I'm really, really excited for you, Niall, and for everybody listening as well, if you're not a member of the teacher profession, this is something you need to bear in mind, is that I'm really excited for Niall to start getting those experiences where you get really deep connections with the students that you teach, and then there's something, and it might not be a lesson that you teach, it might not be a learning objective, it might not be a piece of knowledge, it could just be the way that you treat them as a human being that sticks with you for the rest of their life, and that's the biggest thing they take forward with them. And I'm so privileged to be in contact with so many ex-students, some I've talked to for this podcast, who I just connect with as human beings, and they say, the inspiration that you've done has led me to do this, that, and the other, not necessarily the geography all the time. So, and it's that one, all of you entering the teacher profession right now, I'm really, really excited for you to have those moments, and it's a feeling like no other. Right. But I'm going to, we've had a little harmless Mickey take of Sprayky now. So let's go, let's turn it back on you now, right? So, spill in the beans now, Mr. Cole.
Right.
So, apparently, you were once a ballet prodigy. So you didn't elaborate on that. So now's your chance to elaborate. So come on, then, spill the beans.
No, I don't really know why I put that one in there either. To be honest, like, I'm thinking back now, like, why did I put that one in there? I thought maybe one of my family told me to put it in there. I reserve it for certain times. I mean, I've got quite a lot of photos of me doing ballet, and I remember. There was like in high school, quite a few girls kept coming up to me and laughing one day, and I was like, "Why are you laughing?" And then like they'd actually, what it was, they'd like one of the people that was in high school, I didn't even know they had been in the same ballet production that I was in, and so they'd all on one of their sleepovers had gone and watched the ballet production that I had turned out to be in. I was like the lead, and like it's a really weird dance now. I'm thinking back onto it, but I was the only male dancer. So, like, basically what it was is all of the kind of young girls were, like, flowers, and they did their performance, and I was the farmer, and I had to go around, like, kind of, like, watering and doing different things. But, yeah, so I did ballet until I think I was about 9, I think, and then I played football instead. But I can't remember really any of the stuff that I did or any of the moves. I did gymnastics as well at the same time. And then I kind of just went, actually, I want to play football, and got into football. But yeah, I can't remember any of it. People said, yeah, you're actually quite good at ballet. Apparently the ballet instructor told my mum that she had to take me to a better ballet school because they couldn't take me any further.
Nice.
And then obviously I thought, well, actually, I'd rather just play football. So, and I swam loads at the same time as well. So again, as I was saying before about my personality, just doing loads of different things and not really sticking to one. I kind of did everything at the same time, and then probably had to focus more on one or two. So I did swimming and football.
Nice. Well, I tell you what, I think when you do connect with your students, I think you should consider sharing that story, because I think it could give those kids who, a little bit of feeling that we shouldn't be really strictly sticking to gender norms. I mean, crikey, yeah, I can go off on that so much, but that there is such a vast array of things that we can do out there, which are so constricted by society right now, and you can find your place. And like doing that ballet might have, given you the balance and the skill to make you a decent footballer and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a pretty cool story. I like that. But I don't know. I would have preferred to have been the flower rather than a farmer, I think.
I think looking back on it, I probably would have been as well.
Oh, that's a nice story. Thanks for sharing that. Right. A couple more things then before we close today. So, as already mentioned, we are probably, so this is going to be released around about the time, if not just after, there is COP26. So we cannot, because we're both geographers, we cannot go without talking about this. So we are hoping that when people listen to this for the very first time, there's been a massive, massive breakthrough. And finally, everybody has woken up, the politicians have woken up, and we're all celebrating something meaningful. That's what I hope. But what we'll do for this little, we haven't done a jog your memory segment for a bit. So jog your memory is when we look at a geographical historical event, and then we try and guess when it took place. So, of course, COP26 is based on, it's called the Conference of Parties, where loads of different politicians, stakeholders, scientists get together and they try and bash out the way forward to deal with environmental issues, and, of course, the big one at the moment being the climate crisis. And a big part of that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, who are a collection of scientists and researchers who basically gather the existing research. So they don't do new research, they gather the existing research, and they voluntarily, without pay, gather it all together, assess it, synthesize it, analyze it, and put it out as a great big massive report. So we wonder whether the IPCC report back in August has actually led to anything with COP26. So then, Niall, before I get onto the historical side of the things, how are you feeling about the whole process right now? Because there's a lot of people out there with like climate anxiety. How are you going to approach it as a teacher? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's such a hard one. Like for me, in terms of kind of like, let's not get too political, but obviously my degree is in politics. But I'm hoping it's the latter, or the one that you said, where actually everything turns out that we've got a kind of suddenly everything's good, everyone's realised, everyone's woken up, and there's a whole new policy that's going to be. So we can hope for that, and I'm obviously hoping for that, but I wouldn't necessarily hold out for it. But in terms of like teaching approach, I find it hard for me. Like I've always been such a pragmatic person, which I think now I'm trying to lose a little bit, because I think that like pragmatic is sometimes a bit of kind of not necessarily staying in touch with absolutely everything that you kind of feel and and kind of experience. But I don't get climate anxiety as such. But I think there is a lot of things where I mean, some of probably the best like examples when you just see how we are freely able just to, you look at some of the photos over the summer and just how people leave places. And I mean, I'll always go around if I'm in a place and I've seen that like everyone's just left their rubbish, and then I'll always kind of try and pick as much up of it as I possibly can. But I think like the fact that we're in a position where people do that and they don't think that's horrible, that gives me a bit of anxiety for kind of maybe human society.
Yeah.
But like in terms of, I think it's interesting because we talk a lot about climate change, and kind of I think if you look at the Geographical Association, a lot of events within the geography community, there's a big push of trying to bring alertness to the actual climate crisis, and we are in a crisis, I'd say, now. Like, I think that's not really a denied thing. But teaching it this year, I was surprised. Obviously, it's the first time that I've taught, but teaching it and getting students' opinions, I was surprised at how many students were like, well, duh, we know how much of an issue climate change is. Like I don't think I was in a single class where someone turned around to me, except one student, two students, I think, in the total of like 200 that I taught these couple of lessons to, said that they didn't think that climate change was a serious issue. And like most of them were like, well, we know this now, like what can we go and do about it, sort of thing. It was more like, and I think sometimes we go into this thing, we need to kind of teach students to feel that climate change, or to be alert to climate change, when actually so many of them appeared to already have been alert, and they were then looking out for that kind of that next step of what can we do, what actual actions can we do that's going to make a difference. And I was so surprised because everyone had told me beforehand, like you might get this and you might get that, and I didn't get any of that. Everyone and people were coming up to me, like students were coming up to me saying, so I've gone and done this, or I've gone and done that, and I'm now buying only sustainable kind of purchases. I'm only buying sustainable clothes, those sort of things. Whereas like kind of like they actually you could see they wanted to make that change already. It was more about just looking for those ideas of how. That was quite awakening call for me, I think.
Yeah, and kids, we don't give young people enough credit. I think Well, I know that most teachers do, but I think in society in general don't give young people enough credit, and they do seem to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the adults with this. So while we're all bickering, and I wouldn't say bickering and arguing, a lot of us are moving in the same direction. But while the education sector is debating, shall we say, about how we're going to be teaching about the climate change issue, the kids are already saying, forget all that. We want to know what we want to do. We want what we want to do about it, and how we can hold adults to account about it. So they're already kind of thinking the next step ahead of it in front of us, which I think is a fantastic point you've made there. And and you're quite active on Twitter, as you already mentioned. And there's so many different groups that people can follow, and not just if you're a teacher, but you've got Teachers for Climate Action, you've got Radical Geographer Paul, you've got Dr. Jess Tipton, you've got Global Action Plan, Transform Our World. You've got Clover Hogan and Force of Nature. You've got the UK Sustainable Schools Network. So there are so many out there that can support teachers. This kind of leads DEC, and of course the GA and all the stuff we've done there. So it's we really do need to move forward on that. Right. Okay. So let's go to the thing then. So the timeline, we'll work backwards with the timeline, right? So we know that COP26, hopefully, we're all celebrating a major step forward today. Hopefully. Okay, so in 2018 was the IPCC special report on why 1.5 degree of warming was important. Okay, let's go back. The Paris Agreement, which was apparently meant to be a breakthrough, which has turned out to be hot air, I guess, excusing the pun. Do you remember what year that was? So this is pretty recent.
2015, wasn't it?
Yeah, correct. 2015, right. Okay, so let's go back a little bit further then. So we've got, because the IPCC's 5th report was released just a couple of years before that. Right, okay. When did the Kyoto Protocol get adopted? So this was the first time that at a COP, they decided that there was going to be a greenhouse gas reduction treaty. When was that? Now, because of your age, we're now starting to get into...
I think that was before I was born. It's definitely late 90s.
Well done, yeah. In the right area.
And it was definitely before I was born. So, was it 97?
Oh, 97? Spot on.
Right.
Yeah, and my God, I can't believe you just said before I was born. Right, now the only hint I'll give you then, the earliest date we're going to go for was I was still alive. You were definitely not born at this point. So when do you think have a guess, when was the IPCC first formed, when they were first established? So this was when the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environmental Programme got together and they decided to form the IPCC. So what year was that?
Is that in the 80s or is it?
Yeah.
Let's go.
You're going to age me now.
Yeah, that's why I've got to be careful. Let's go 85.
Okay, that's not a bad guess. Okay, 1988.
88, okay.
1988. So 88, yeah, so I was 6 years old then. So, yeah, and that's how long this issue has been going. There's been enough scientific evidence out there. In fact, in 1988, the key moment, and I think you can actually maybe be able to find the speech on YouTube, but NASA scientist James Hansen actually testified to the US Senate that man-made global warming was a problem, and it's now becoming a visible problem, right? And at the same time, that was the year that the IPCC was formed. So back in the late 80s, the ball was already starting to roll about how do we deal with this problem. And of course, we know we can deal with this because there was another famous protocol, the Montreal Protocol in 1991 that dealt with the
chlorofluorocarbons, is it?
Spot on. Yeah. The whole, and to try and reverse the damage to the ozone layer. So there's precedent for this to be done. So we can do it, everybody. Right. Okay. So let's finish off with something loads of fun now. So what we're going to do is that we like to link all of our guests together by saying about how we are all geographers, right? So this is where you have a word and you've got 30 seconds to link it to geography or geographical processes or whatever, however you so wish. Now, we spoke to the wonderful Dan Raven-Ellison last time. The word that he was given was by a group of ex-students who piled on me in a panel discussion, right? They gave him the word impossible to link to the actual, but that was too easy for him. He nailed it. So while they went a bit abstract with him, they've gone a bit. Dan's gone a bit nuanced with you, Niall.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's actually a really lovely word because you can take a personal take on it. And the word that Dan's given you to link to geography is purpose.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so 30 seconds on the word purpose. Off you go.
Okay, so I can link it to my own purpose. I think geography gives everyone a purpose because it gives them a way of recollecting their own experiences within kind of the world that they live in. So it might be kind of from whether they're interested in physical or human or that interaction of both. But I think once you start to look into every single thing that's around you, once you start to look up, not just kind of in your own kind of own, tunnel vision, you can start to kind of see the purpose of everything that's around you. You can start to see the purpose of place, purpose of scent, and it can make you feel kind of connected to everyone else that's been there in the past or that'll be there in the future.
Yeah, there you go. I'll say easy. It wasn't easy, but
it's just so much, isn't there? It's just it's just like hard to, and in 30 seconds to narrow it down to something that makes kind of some sort of sense without kind of just going off on one. Start listing everything.
This is why I'll never go on a game show. Excellent, Niall. Well done. Right, but you get to have your own way with the next guest. So can you think of a word? It could be anything you like. It could be tangible. It could be abstract. It could be nuanced. It can be an object, a place, whatever it so wish. What would you like for the next person to come up with a link to geography?
Okay. Lens, which I guess then is quite similar to purpose, though, because I have my own interpretation of what lens means to me within geography, but I know it could go in so many different ways. So
okay, well, let's go with lens. Okay, right. So to end off, we've already given a shout out to Spraykey, who's probably never going to listen to this, but never mind. We'll try and twist his arm. Is there anyone else you'd like to say hi to, Niall?
If I was on any other podcast, Kit, I'd probably mention your name, but obviously I am on your podcast, so that might not work. But my two mentors probably for the kind of the last year, so Melanie Winnie and James Thompson, really, really helpful for me. And then Helen Edmondson as the PGC tutor at UEA. And I think she's working on a lot of different things, I think, which could be quite interesting coming up. So yeah, those are three just in terms of my own personal kind of from the experiences this year, because I think other guests on the podcast have really smacked it with kind of people to go and explore a bit further.
Yeah, they really have. Yeah, and that's the reason why we do the shout outs. It's not just for you to say hi, but also just to widen the community, and to people hear the name and they think, I'd like to go and see what they do as well. And Helen, and a big shout out to Helen Edmondson, who's done such hard work. Of course, is covering from maternity leave and so is juggling so many balls at the moment. So so that's a lovely shout out to Helen. And finally, hopefully, as we said, you're back on the radio with Teachers Talk Radio on a Friday night. But is there any other way that people can get in touch with you or follow you? What's your Twitter handle and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so Twitter handle, and it's only Twitter really that kind of you find me. So Geo Mr. Cole with a capital G, M and C.
Yeah. Geo Mr. Cole.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, Niall, this has been an absolute pleasure to have a one-to-one with you rather than for a session or a lesson or the digital ether. So it was good to chat to you. And and I'm all looking forward to continue working with you in the geography teacher community, and very best luck with your NQT. You're going to smash it.
Thanks, Kit. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you. We'll see.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at coffeegeogpod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandgeog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.